Slavoj Žižek's interpretation of Hegel's absolute knowledge is built on a single radical claim. The heart of Hegel's system is not reconciliation, harmony, or conceptual mastery, but a traumatic kernel of negativity that never dissolves. What Hegel calls absolute negativity, Žižek identifies with the Freudian Lacanian death drive, a blind, repetitive, non-teleological insistence that both constitutes the subject and propels the dialectic forward. In Žižek's hands, Hegel becomes the thinker not of totality but of an irreducible crack within being itself. For Žižek, Hegel's pure I is not a substantial self, not a metaphysical soul, not even a stable point of consciousness. It is a void, a tear in the fabric of being, a self-relating negativity. This negativity is not merely epistemological, an inability to know the thing in itself, but ontological. The subject is the gap in substance's self-identity. Žižek equates this Hegelian negativity directly with the death drive. In Freud, the death drive is the compulsion to repeat, the insistence of a non-biological, non-adaptive force that disrupts the organism's homeostasis. In Lacan, it becomes the insistence of the real, the traumatic kernel that resists symbolization. Žižek fuses these with Hegel. The subject is the death drive, the point where substance produces an internal rupture that cannot be healed. Thus, in Žižek's reading, Hegel's absolute knowledge is not the subject's triumph over negativity, but the recognition that the subject is nothing but negativity, a restless, self-sundering force. Žižek's most provocative claim is that Hegel's dialectic is not a smooth, rational progression, but is powered by a non-dialectical, blind, repetitive kernel. Hegelian negativity, he argues, contains a moment that cannot be sublated, idealized, or aufgehoben. This is the pure repetition Freud described, a mechanical compulsion that persists even when it serves no purpose. While Hegel often treats repetition as the engine of sublation, repetition that elevates, Žižek insists that beneath this lies a repetition that does not elevate, a repetition that simply repeats. This blind drive is the motor of spirit. It is the reason the dialectic never rests, never closes, never becomes a harmonious totality. Even at the level of absolute knowledge, spirit does not settle into a serene identity with itself. Instead, it continues to move because the death drive continues to insist. Absolute knowledge is not the end of movement, but the recognition of the impossibility of any final rest. Žižek's originality lies in his refusal to romanticize negativity as pure dynamism or creative destruction. For him, negativity is not a heroic force of liberation, but a kind of stuckness, a mechanical immobilization that disturbs the natural flow of things. He describes Western negativity as the moment when something refuses to move, when a singularity interrupts the cosmic rhythm. This stuckness is not a failure of spirit, but its very condition. Only when something gets stuck, when repetition jams the smooth circulation of life, can the new emerge. The radically new, Žižek argues, never appears as a spontaneous eruption of creativity. It appears only when the system breaks down, when repetition becomes unbearable, when the drive's insistence interrupts the organic flow of becoming. Negativity is the site of emergence, not because it destroys, but because it refuses to move. Žižek uses psychoanalysis to reinterpret the philosophical transition from Kant to Hegel. Kant's universe is the universe of desire. The subject is structured around a constitutive lack, forever oriented toward the inaccessible thing in itself. Desire is sustained by what it cannot reach. Hegel, in Žižek's reading, shifts from desire to drive. The drive does not aim at an object. It finds satisfaction in the very failure to reach it. The drive circles around the object, enjoying the repetitive movement itself. This shift is crucial. What Kant treats as epistemological ignorance, our inability to know the thing, is reinterpreted by Hegel as an ontological feature of reality. The gap is not in us. The gap is in being itself. Thus, absolute knowledge is not the overcoming of ignorance, but the insight that ignorance is constitutive, that the real is the gap, the negativity, the drive. Finally, Žižek redefines Hegelian reconciliation. It is not the subject's successful integration of all otherness, not the harmonious unity of concept and reality. Instead, reconciliation is the acceptance of the death drive as the very core of subjectivity. To reconcile with the absolute is to recognize that the absolute is not a positive substance, but the excess of negativity that constitutes us. Freedom does not arise from the mastery of negativity, but from the acceptance of its irreducible presence. The subject becomes free when it recognizes that its own core is this threatening, repetitive, non-dialectical drive. Absolute knowledge, then, is not the final synthesis, but the moment when spirit recognizes that its own ground is groundlessness, that the negativity it sought to overcome is the very condition of its existence. Zizek's Hegel is a thinker of rupture, not closure, of drive, not harmony, of negativity, not reconciliation. Absolute knowledge is not the end of the dialectic, but the recognition that the dialectic is driven by a blind, repetitive insistence that can never be sublated. The subject is this insistence. Freedom is its acceptance. And the absolute is nothing other than the restless negativity that moves even when all reasons for movement have disappeared.
Das Wahre ist das Ganze.